Have you found yourself during a stretch of time finding that if you only do things in a certain way, then sleep will be under control? If you just avoid going out too late, you take a certain supplements at a certain time, you're okay. If so, you've experienced what we call a truce. This episode has been on my mind for a while. There's some things here that I think could be really, really helpful to explore and explain. It's ideas around this truth or ceasefire type situation that is so common. So I'm glad you're here. Hope you'll find a lot of value in this episode. And by the way, this will most likely be the last Insomnia Insight episode for a while. We're coming up on summer, and me and the family will be out much of the summer, and yeah, it's a nice time for kind of like taking a break, and then coming back in September. So I don't really know how much content there will be here, but again, most likely this is the last Insomnia Insight episode for a while. But anyways, let's jump into it. What we're going to talk about here are three topics. I divided this class into three topics, and randomly as I'm speaking, I know some people in the comment section say, "Hey Daniel, you speak too fast." Well, this is just my way of speaking, but if it is too fast, do know that YouTube has this function where you can go at 0.75 speed or something like that. Anyways, the three sections today are going to be: number one, battle and peace. Then we're going to talk about truce, and then the way we want the truce to end. And so the first one here, again, battle and peace. This is very quite straightforward, but basically battle is when we're engaged in an internal struggle, right? We are trying to sleep, we are trying to force ourselves to sleep, and we are trying to control our emotions, control our thoughts. And these inner experiences, they're sort of like a bar of wet soap. The more we try to grasp it, the more out of hand it gets. So this is the battle when we're trying to force things to happen and they're not happening at all. It really feels like we're in a struggle. And now peace is the opposite of that. The absence of trying to control our sleep, our thoughts and emotions, they lead to an absence and of inner struggle. This is a peaceful place. And of course, all the content, all the education here is to help anyone who's been in a struggle to find their way to that peaceful place. And that includes learning about a truce. And a truce can be found between battles or between a battle and a peaceful place. And the reason I point this out, it's kind of like it speaks to the last point, which is how a truce ends. Like a truce can end with hostilities again, right? And a truce can end with peace. So it can go both ways when we have found ourselves in the place of truce. And of course, we want it to end in peace. So just highlighting that. So what is this truce? What is the idea behind this truce? Well, let me actually share right away that I find this happen quite often, that we have a new student and the student shares their story or just maybe mentions that, well, I've been really having a rough time for 2 weeks. And then several times I've gone like, oh, you struggled with sleep for 2 weeks. Okay, that's, in the grand scheme of things, compared to many other students, that's not very long. So I look forward to learning with you. And then the student says, oh, well, actually, I had a real tough time with insomnia like 3 years ago. And between then and now, things have been okay. And then you start kind of scratching the surface and you see like during these 3 years, for example, the student in this case has been avoiding long trips, not having coffee. They have been essentially in a truce. They've actually been maintaining a lot of kind of rituals and efforts, but they don't identify that as a truce. They just identify that as like, that was good, but now I'm in a real struggle. But we can learn a lot from this truce, and just seeing that this was actually a truce more than anything else can be really, really helpful. So just kind of, this is where the idea of the truce came from. And now we'll see how it evolves. How can we find ourselves in this place of a truce? Well, firstly, I want to say there's kind of just an A, B, and C here. So we're going to go over like the ABCs of truce, if you will. So A is that sleep always happens. And this is basically like sleep physiology, gas and brake stuff. So For those of you who are not familiar with the gas and brake model, super quick review. When we humans are awake, there's a sleep drive. Need for sleep arises in our body, and we sometimes experience that as sleepiness. This is the gas in the sleep system. The thing that makes us humans sleep is our sleep drive, which is produced by wakefulness only. That's the only thing in the whole entire universe that can produce sleep drive, and that just builds again automatically when we're awake. Now we have a brake in our sleep system, which is hyperarousal. Just like a car has a brake for safety, so do we humans. It's there to make sure we don't sleep when it is dangerous to sleep. So we have a brake in the sleep system. Now, sleep will always happen, even if you're really frazzled, really scared. Eventually, the sleep drive will be quite strong, and even if we have a lot of brake, even if we're really hyper aroused, eventually the brain will make us sleep, even if it's just for short periods of time. Even if we don't even experience it, sleep always happens. And now, with this in mind, with keeping in mind that sleep always happens, imagine if we have been in this like battle for sleep. We've been trying everything under the sun to sleep, and then eventually sleep does happen, which it always does. Well, then we can easily think that it was what we did that made sleep happen. All right. It can look like we succeeded in something. And then this was our B. Now to C, in this scenario, this thought can often pop up. Aha, if I just do this and I avoid that, I'll be okay. Or, similarly, as long as I do exactly this, I can control it. This idea can easily arise from the fact that sleep always happens. When we're trying to make sleep happen, we can think it was the things we did that made sleep happen. And then again, we have this idea, and this idea is essentially a truce. This is a truce. I just picked the definition from online. A truce, by definition, is an agreement between enemies or opponents to stop fighting or arguing for a certain time. Well, we can see this here, that there's an idea that there's a problem, and that's sort of the enemy, that the antagonist, the adversary, and we can, by doing this, we will keep the adversary at bay. This is a truce. This is sort of an agreement to, like, okay, if I just do this, you won't attack me. Okay, good. That is the truce. And now, you just heard me say this in this fictional example, that someone may really be in this like truce, in this truce for a long time, for years. And a logical follow-up question may then be like, so if the truce is, it is a more peaceful place than a battle, right? It is an easier place. It's a preferable place to be in than a battle. Then, something nice is happening here. And isn't this evidence that it's actually working? Isn't the truce working? And if so, what is it that makes the truce work? Well, we actually find the answer to this in our first principle. The most fundamental principle of our teachings of NATO is this one, that peace of mind and peaceful sleep are always effortless. And like in the truce scenario, it's not necessarily we have peaceful sleep, but more peaceful sleep than in a battle, right? And there we can then go back to our question, what makes the truce work? And we see that it is actually delegation. Because if we say anything else than delegation, then we're violating our first principle. We know it has to be delegation. It has to be us becoming more effortless that leads us to have more peaceful sleep. It's by postulate, it has to be like, or I'm thinking about like the Mandalorian, by creed, it has to be like that. But anyways, delegation, it is. So if we look at this thought that comes, that is behind the truth, that if I do this, then I'm fine. It's essentially saying, if I do this, I don't have to do anything else. And it is that second part. That's what actually helps. That's the part that works. If I do this, that's not so helpful. That's effort. But then I don't have to do anything else. That's really helpful, because that is a step towards effortlessness. The I don't have to do anything else part, that leads to this like partial effortlessness, right? And trying less, that leads to a little more peace. So it's the effortless portion of this that actually is helpful. Now, when we've seen this, I just had, let's see, three more kind of reflections upon the truth. And one is that it can last for years, but there typically are some skirmishes, that when I hear a story of a truce, it's often like, well, if I just kept all these rituals, I was fine. But here and there, of course, when there was a trip, then there would be some more struggle, and I would go up on the dose of this or change something. But then I went back to being okay again. So we can often have these like little skirmishes during the truce, and sometimes those can be the kind of dominant experience of the truce, that somebody looks back upon this period of not so much struggle and just remember it as like, oh, I was fine. It was like here and there it would kind of flare up, but overall I was fine. So a truce can last for years, and there are typically some skirmishes. And we've sort of touched upon this again, but in retrospect, a truce can look like a peaceful time. And this is going back to the example of a new student that I presented earlier. When we're sort of back in the battle, then we can look back on the truce and see like, that's desirable. That's where I want to be. And we can think like, that's a nice place to be. And it's more pleasant, of course, than being in a battle, but it wasn't actually peaceful. When we go back and look at it, we limited our lives. There were things we wanted to do that we didn't. We were deploying effort. We were still spending a lot of energy trying to sort of maintain sleep and things of that nature. So it wasn't really a peaceful time, and that can be helpful to see, because it teaches us the way to where we really want to be, which was like a completely peaceful time, or completely abandoning the struggle. So now another reflection here can be like, okay, if you describe this, Daniel, as like a truce is a place where there's, it's clearly a more pleasant place to be in than in a battle, then somebody may wonder like, so is there a problem if there is a truce? Is there a problem if I have some rituals and habits and things of that nature? And I would say, of course it's not. If there's no, like, it's kind of by definition, if somebody doesn't think of something as a problem, in our space, then it isn't the problem. If somebody has some habits, some rituals and things like that, but they don't mind, they don't think of it as strange or unusual, and somebody's just living their life, of course that's not a problem. But again, it can help to deploy honesty. If somebody says like, oh no, I'm living life exactly the way I want to do, but if they really think about it, they're like actually avoiding, I don't know, trips or going out in the evening or things they want to do, then again, it can help to just be honest with oneself. If one says, no, I'm living the way I want to do, then that's the end of that. That's nice, that's wonderful. But if you see that actually there are things I'm missing out on, things that are meaningful, valuable for me, that I want to do, that I'm not doing right now because I'm sort of scared of waking up this grizzly bear again, that's helpful, because then that leads us to then make some changes and arrive where we want to be. That's what I want to say with that. So speaking of which, there is a certain way that we want a truce to end, of course. And as I said in the beginning, a truce can end with hostilities and battle again, or it can end with peace. And how do we arrive at that peaceful place? Well, I think the key thing to see is that it's not that we win a battle and then we have peace, because by nature, trying to win a battle is going to just become its own battle, but rather it is abandonment of the battle that leads where we want to be. Leaving the battlefield, no longer trying to win, is actually what leads to peace. And another way to say that is that unilaterally laying down of arms can show us that there never was an enemy. It's of course we'd want to be like, okay, if you just stop, then I'll stop. But in reality, it's our attempts of making the supposed enemy stop that actually keeps things going, right? So in a way, it's like, it's the unilateral waving the white flag or abandoning the battle, just the unilateral laying down of arms, shows us there never actually was an enemy, but sometimes we get into fighting ourselves. And if we're fighting ourselves, then again, there's nobody else that we can make abandon the battle or, stop harassing us. It's upon ourselves to lay down the arms, abandon the hostilities, abandon the battle, and that leads to where we want to be. And if this resonates with you, if you find yourself having had these truce episodes, or if you're in a truce episode now, then I hope this really helped. And I guess one more thought that popped up here was, okay, what exactly do I mean by laying down arms? Well, it's essentially, if we're finding these efforts, if we're finding that I'm doing this or avoiding this to achieve sleep, then that is, a little bit of the sort of aggressiveness there, or the attempts to control are there. So when we move away from those, that is what I mean by laying down the arms or abandoning the battle. So again, hope this made sense. As always, let me know in the comment sections how this sounded, and if you're actually find yourself to that peaceful place right now, that is wonderful. Please let us know. Leave a comment in the comment section, and that's always so nice to hear a message of hope and inspiration for the community. On the other hand, if you're finding yourself in a battle and it's hard to see how you can leave this, if you're feeling alone, nobody to talk to, people around you don't really understand, then please head over to thesleepcoachschool.com. Check out our coaching options. And if you decide to hop on a call or join any of our programs, we look forward to seeing you on the other side. That's it for today. Look forward to having you the rest of this week. And that's it for today. Bye for now.